Hello there. Um, you probably noticed yourself a trend in recent decades, especially of all kinds of actors um, making speeches, making TV appearances, commercials for charities or whatever, making political appearances, trying to tell us what we should do, what we should think. And um, I'm here to tell you that I think it's the biggest load of rubbish. That these people are trained pretenders. That's what they do for a living. They pretend to be somebody else. So they might come across as if they know what they're on about. They might be brilliant martial artists, or top scientists, or you know, um, an expert chess player or an amazing sportsman or something in the film or TV series. But the reality is, most of these people don't really have any skills apart from being able to pretend. A lot of them don't even have a proper education, especially those who, started very young. Their schooling on set and sort of around the TV programs and films they're making would have been absolutely minimal. So quite a lot of them are like literally half educated. And yet they think they have the right, because they're famous, to tell us what we should think about various subjects, including who we should vote for. Now, if that's your only talent is pretending, then I just think, well, how can you trust these people? How do you ever know what their real face is, who they actually are, what their real personality is like, if they spend their whole time pretending to be somebody else? And what other skills do they have that qualify them to give anybody advice? The other thing is that so many of them, once they've become rich and famous, they either never knew what it was like to be an ordinary person in the first place, in the case of sort of dynasties where they're the child of somebody who was already very famous, or people that have been successful for such a long period of time that they've just forgotten what it's like to be a normal person. I would say many of these people, they couldn't tell you the last time they got on a bus or on a train. And they probably couldn't tell you what the price of a loaf of bread is or a pint of milk. Because these kind of people, they never have to go to the shop to buy milk. They have an army of people who do all these things for them. So they literally have no idea what normal life is like for other people, yet they lecture us about how we should live. So there are some exceptions, of course. There are people who are very rich and famous who are quite normal. I'll give you a couple of examples I can think of. One would be Keanu Reeves, who's incredibly famous from a multitude of films, in particular the Matrix quadrilogy. He's he's been famous a long time, but he seems to be very grounded. He's not involved in the whole Hollywood scene, and he doesn't go on TV or on adverts telling people what they should think. Although he has done a lot of actual work for charity, donated huge amounts of money, but he keeps that very quiet. That's not very well known. And he actually has a business of his own. He runs a motorcycle company. He's involved in the design and production of some very fancy, bespoke motorcycles. And so, like, he has a normal life outside of Hollywood, outside of all these yes people, and this whole sort of massive ego trip of being a star. Another person that comes to my mind is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's pretty old now, but he came from quite a poor family in Austria. So he didn't grow up having like lobster for dinner and champagne and all that kind of stuff. He didn't live in a fancy mansion. He had a poor start, and he's made a success of himself. Before he was a film star, he was, of course, a champion bodybuilder, but that took him some time to become really successful. And at times, he was living in rented accommodation, I think, in London. And, you hear a few stories about him that he actually stayed in touch with his old landlady and would go and visit her on a regular basis. And he'd been very generous to people he's known in his life before he was a rich man. Which kind of shows that he's pretty much a grounded guy. Apparently he's a very professional, easy enough person to work with, not got this inflated ego, this sort of diva complex like many of these people have. He might not be the greatest actor in the world, but he doesn't have this sort of prima donna attitude, which of course makes life a lot easier for everybody else who's involved in making films, like the crew, the director, etc., and even the other actors. And there's a story from a few years ago about him helping out this 102-year-old woman at the time who was being evicted from her home in California, and he just decided he was going to help her, which was a really nice thing to do, because you can be sure that for all their talk about morality and this and that, many of these actors are just out for themselves. They'll show up for a photo op that makes them look good, but he actually asks them to lift a finger to help somebody else, and they'll run a mile. So I think these are probably the worst people you could possibly listen to in terms of life advice, in terms of who you should vote for, what beliefs you should have, what values you should have. Because, Hollywood is a cesspool of depravity and horrible behavior at the best of times. And these people are at the pinnacle of this sort of depravity and immorality, in my opinion. And I wouldn't trust a word that comes out of their mouths, most of them, because that's what they do all day, is lie. Acting is professional lying, really. You are pretending to be something that you're not. And okay, that's what the job is to pretend to be something that you're not. But, when it comes to real life situations, who's to say they're just acting still, I wonder if most of these people actually really care about anything at all other than their own selves and their own egos. I would say probably not in most cases. I think probably 90%, probably even 99% of actors are just egotistical narcissists and obsessed with their own image and their own body of work and promoting their own selves. So I certainly don't pay any attention to these people. And there's a handful of actors and actresses who I actually have some respect for, because I know they actually are decent people and they do decent things in their real life. But from what I can see, the vast bulk of them are just purely wrapped up in their own lives, their own success, and the trappings of Hollywood and all the money and possessions that go with it. So my advice to anybody watching this is, if you're thinking about being influenced by anybody, why would you listen to celebrities anyway? But of all those people who could be classed as celebrities, I'd say the least qualified to give anybody any advice are probably actors. So, my advice to you is try and make up your own mind about what you want to do or what you think, and just completely ignore anything that comes out in the mouths of the actors, except in the role that they're actually performing, that they're getting paid to do. That's fine. That's their job. But anything other than that, I would just say, forget it. These people are not worth listening to. So that's my take on it. Maybe you disagree, or maybe you agree. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you have to say if you want to put a comment about this. And if you find this interesting, please give me a like, and feel free to share the video and subscribe as well if you want to see more of my content. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.